if I zoom out of the US, there's been a few countries that have trialed 4-day weeks. It's a shame that people are talking about time. I quite like talking about output or results. And a lot of people feel that working less, perhaps, or the 4-day week or a 32-hour week or whatever, is the answer to it.
The currency is money. We shifted currency as time, but I think you just introduced a new currency, which is energy.
Do we think that people would be happy to take a pay cut to do 4 days versus 5? All right, amazing. Ed, take it away, my friend.
Hi, I'm Edward Cruz of Maleh Lewis, and I'm thrilled to introduce the latest segment of Talent Talk. In a bold move to reshape the American work landscape, Senator Bernie Sanders on Wednesday, March 13th, introduced a bill to establish a standard for 4-day work week in the United States without any reduction in pay. As we delve into the intricacies and implications of this groundbreaking bill, we stand at the cusp of a potential revolution in how we define work, productivity, and quality of life. Join us as we explore the depths of this transformative legislation and the potential to redefine the workplace for the modern American day worker. Joining me today are my colleagues, the CEO of Maleh Lewis, Mr. Louis Maleh, and Jamie Craw, principal of Executive Search. I welcome you both to Talent News. Welcome.
Wow, what intro. Thanks.
Well done.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome.
Solid.
Welcome. Well,
Solid.
Today I want to talk a little bit about, the bill that's been proposed. The bill is seeking to really redefine full-time employment without diminishing employee pay. It really suggests there's a seismic shift from traditional 40-hour to a 32-hour work week over 4 years. This is being championed.
Wait, so this has gone through that? Yeah, there has it.
Not yet.
Not
this
yet.
is being
Not
championed by one of the U.S. senators. He's arguing that this is going to be an incredible gain for productivity to the American worker. It'll be the change that can really move us to a more of a non-stressful environment. But I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are.
Jamie, do you want to?
Yeah, I think my thoughts are, it kind of brings me back a few years ago to when we passed legislation around pay transparency and the idea of legislation really guiding the way that we do recruiting and the way that we approach just the overall, talent acquisition landscape. So I always think of it from that lens. How does it impact our ability to really get talent in the door and retain talent? And I think at the time, what I remember, really wrestling with is how do we put this into practice? And it reminds me that, laws come first and they come from a place of needing change. And sometimes they feel really drastic and sometimes they feel really disruptive. And then I think where my mind then goes is how are people going to implement this for the greater good? And similar to pay transparency, we have moved the needle tremendously in terms of equalizing pay for, previously, underrepresented groups. And so I think it's up to us to really define not just what the law says, but how we put it into practice.
Yeah. Be interesting to see if it actually becomes practice. I mean, for me, if I zoom out of the US, there's been a few countries that have trialed 4-day weeks. I think Germany have a little bit. I think Sweden and some other Scandinavian countries. So there's a lot of talk on it. Whether it actually ends up happening, I don't know. Because for me also, like, it's a shame that people are talking about time. I quite like talking about output or results over time. It's everyone's this is like classic factory era thing, right? Where you're working paid by the hour. In some industries you are, right? But I think in some that classic white collar industry, like, I don't know. For me it's the wrong conversation. I'm not sure. I think the
word is derivative, right? We're just continuing to try and shape something that's already been built versus kind of zero-based been thinking a lot about zero-based budgeting, right? Just get rid of everything that we've done before and actually start thinking about what we need today. And I think if you go from that direction, then what would we be talking about if not the 32-hour work week? What's the broader, theme here? What's the bigger conversation?
Yeah, because you know what, like for us, right, we do Exec Search, and if we have someone on our team who is doing outstandingly well, we don't mind how long someone's working for, right? Like hours. So, I think there's a lot of jobs, you're right, where it should really be about output, not about time. Because if you're like trying to like get, if you're trying to do well in work, and what happens if like you're not going to reply to clients on like the day you're off, or I don't know. Like I think it's I'm out. I don't know. Ed, what do you think?
I'm gonna say, I'm a bit in the gray area. I'm not yay or nay yet. I'm still doing my own research. I know with the, as we embrace more automation, robotics, artificial intelligence, based on what I've read, what the senator has put up front is that, companies can afford to give employees more time off without cutting their pay and benefits. I agree with the output argument. I've also been reading data around British companies. They've been doing a study with British companies that agreed to adopt a 32-hour work week. There was a study done by university researchers that that enlisted 61 companies, or I think it was. And, the participating companies saw, revenue growth and, than the prior 6 months. And then overall, all the companies saw increase in revenue and productivity. So I don't know where I fall yet. I know there are some compelling arguments for a 32-hour work week. I think it's going to be really interesting. I think because the conversation is happening now, I don't think it's going to go anywhere. Even if this law doesn't get adopted, I think that more and more politicians and companies will adopt. I mean, we have companies
What do you
already
think?
doing hybrid.
What are the benefits?
I'm sorry, say it again.
What are the benefits, do you think? Like, what are the like productivity? I mean, I don't know. I think the jury's out a little bit. It depends what you read, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think what you get in the end from an employee perspective, right? You get a higher job satisfaction, right? You get a better work-life balance, right? Maybe lower stress, right? Some of the organizations have recorded better morale, consistent attendance, right? For a 4-day work week, right? Less distractions, more efficiency, just more innovation, right? And more engaged leadership. I mean, again, the jury's still out, right? I mean, I don't think there's enough data, but there's some good data that's out there. And the bottom line, I think the senator was talking about having employees that are less stressed, right? We talk about mental health being a huge issue. Well, this is a moment in time where it's a bit of chicken, right? It's like companies, put your money where your mouth is, really. And if they can show that productivity is not dropping and revenues are up, then what's the argument against?
Maybe. Jamie, what do you reckon?
I think that those are all really good points, Ed. And I think that we oftentimes are thinking about the employee, and I think we could balance that in thinking about employer, what's in it for the employer. And I think that there's a lot of things where we meet and go, like, this is good for the person and for the company. I think we have to have that conversation more. Like, what is the benefit for both people, and start there. I do think that we need less of a one-size-fits-all approach. I think I'd rather go, I understand, when we put it into law, then it creates a much more, stringent way that we have to implement something. And I think that what we're also seeing is, more people coming to the table with what works for them. There was a very we had a way that we worked that really wasn't challenged for a long time. And now we have more people coming in with a very different viewpoint, whether it's generational, whether it's, different socioeconomic, people in the workforce, different socioeconomics in the workforce, more women, more parents, and then, more mental health, and that affects everybody. So I am with Lewis. I think putting a bracket around the 32-hour work week, we're still talking about the same things. And I'd rather us be talking more about flexible work arrangements and distributed work and output and a shift in leadership and a shift in outcomes versus how many hours we're putting in. But I think, you need to pay, we all work on a 40-hour work week. We're all essentially compensated, whether we're exempt or non-exempt, on a 40-hour work week here in the US. So you have to have some sort of standard for how you pay people. So I understand, there's economics involved. But again, I think that's where the, creativity and implementation comes in. And I think that people really do, there's no question we need a change. I just don't know, if this is the solution or if there are other solutions out there.
I think there's other solutions. For me, and we've all talked about this a lot, and you both have experienced corporate America, large corporates and smaller firms. A lot of people are talking about, so burnout, work-life balance, things like that. And maybe and a lot of people feel that working less, perhaps, or the 4-day week or a 32-hour week or whatever is the answer to it. And I think there's probably other things, right? It's suddenly, like, for me, when you find something, and I know not everyone is fortunate enough to find something that they love to do, but when you find something that you love to do, it doesn't really feel like work. Like you can really go, you can put work in and still maintain energy and things, right? It's when you're like dreading Monday. It doesn't matter whether you're working like 4 days a week, 32 hours a week. I mean, it's draining, right? So I think there's something about, like, as an individual, trying to find things that you enjoy for work, which is difficult sometimes, I know. And the other is, like, I hate the word work-life balance. Hate the word work-life balance, because the opposite of life is death, and everyone equates work to death, and it's such a bad place to be, right? If you're like equating your work to like the worst thing ever, then it's just draining. So I'd like to get to a point where it's like you're integrating your work in your life. So, to the flexibility point, that, you can integrate all aspects, whether it's like family, work, your health. I think if you get to a point where you're like connecting all of these bits which make up your life, then, you can just go hard and you can be really productive on everything. So
I would say, we talk a lot about compensation, and I talk a lot about and I think a lot about currency, right? For the longest time, right? Since I've been in many years in the, like you said, corporate America, the currency is money. Now we shifted currency as time, but I think you just introduced a new currency, which is energy. The currency of energy is really important. And if you're working 32 hours a week and you're really energetic around it, and you're getting your energy recovery from things you're doing when you're not working, and then you absolutely will benefit the place that you're working. The problem is control, right? We can't control the off time. And so when we kind of know what people are doing, we have more control over the work that they do. So when I think about this 32-hour work week, it's trust. And are we building trust in the people that work with us? And I think that there is, when we think about the current trends, I see a lot of people interested in exploring smaller companies or companies that are growing and still kind of figuring out their culture. And one of the things that I really, hope for is more trust and more of energy building activities, because then, you're absolutely loving what you do. And then we're shifting the conversation to a very different place. Than kind of the derivative model of how many hours are we compensating a week. That's not life. That's just, like you said, it's a factory model. I think we can do better.
I think so. It's like the TikTok, right? The guy who didn't want to turn up for the ATM because you don't pay me for. You don't want to be that.
I think about it all the time. I think about it all the time. And the 8 a.m. meeting, like these are like the code for The other danger, and not to take over, but the other danger I see is that people think when you want to put less hours in as the guardrail that you don't want to work as much. And I think that's where we have to really talk about energy. 32 energetic hours are much more powerful than 80, drained hours. That's a bigger conversation.
That's true. But Ed, I'd love to get your thoughts on it. But like just if you make the analogy to sport, is like the best sportsmen always put the most work in, don't they? Like you always hear it, don't you?
I don't know any, the all-stars that I have followed, the Michael Jordans, the Kobe Bryants, the Derek Cheaters. I mean, they all talk about being the first one in and the last one's out, right? I mean, and what's interesting is that you take those individuals, those athletes, but there is another piece, and I was thinking about this after our discussion. Those athletes were particularly gifted, right? Because you can get others that are walking in with them and they may not get the same output, right? And leaving at the same time. And they may not get the same output, right? So I'm going to say that, the model theoretically is interesting. But I don't think there's a one size that fits all, right? I think that, it's more like, it's very unique to the company. It's more like fingerprints, right? Everyone's going to run their own model and do it differently. I think you have to know your employee population. I think what that means is that HR has to have their finger on the pulse. Managers have to have their finger on the pulse in terms of who their employees are, and what their culture is like, and what their people bring day in and day out. I think in order for this kind of thing to be successful, management, HR, they'll have to be a lot closer to the day to day and realize how to make people, or what makes people more productive. So again, I'm in that gray space.
But also, again, you've both worked at big firms. I mean, is it possible to be say bespoke for each person, or is that or they can't be, and is that why we're seeing people want to come to smaller, medium-sized companies?
I think that's part of it. And also, you mentioned those athletes. I will just point out that there's a cost, right, to putting everything into one passion. And speaking for the women and the parents, who are. There's this, it's something we battle every day, that we love working, love what we do. And we also have this other part of our lives that we've just kind of pushed a little bit to the side in the workforce. We don't talk as much about it. And I'm a big proponent of, and one of the things I've loved about, the cultures of companies is really putting your calendar out there and really standing behind what you're doing, and really being honest about what a 40-hour work week looks like. I think that when we're honest that, everybody is taking time to do things that are benefiting their whole lives and their whole selves, and not being so cagey about, how we're spending our time, we can really help shape, the cultural landscape. We can help shape the next generations. It's what's being done behind the scenes is really to a detriment to corporate culture, because everybody that I know of who's, risen to really successful and leadership type positions are absolutely taking advantage of flexible work arrangements. And so this idea that only some people are, adhering to a 9 to 5 work day is just missing the point. Yes, Louis, you asked a question. Of course, it makes it difficult for HR. And it's one of the reasons why it's so incredibly difficult to offer flexibility, especially in a lot of corporations that have really different business models within their own entities. You have hourly workers, you have union workers, you have, technical workers, you have people that do need to be in person, all, trying to adhere to the same laws and standards. It's incredibly difficult to implement.
Yeah. And just to build on that, and I don't know, this might be an argument for it. I think what the senator, and again, this paraphrasing here, talked a lot about was aiming at holding big corporations more accountable to the workers, right? He talked a lot about blaming greedy executives for pocketing extra profits as technology has boasted, or at least has increased and really, taken productivity to another level. Do we continue the trend around technology only really will benefit those individuals that are in leadership, that are at the top, or do we as employees demand transformational change to benefit the working people, right? And do we lower the work?
Yeah, no, that's true. I do like to think nowadays that everyone's working class, like everyone's working, like senior leadership. Everyone likes to shoot up at the company and shoot up at, the leaders. But I think, the one thing I realized over COVID, speaking to lots of leaders, is that, they were lonely. Like, who does the go-to person go to when things aren't going well? So, I think everyone's trying to find their feet. I think hopefully the AI and the tech helps everyone be more productive. So maybe you can be doing more stuff. So I think it's super interesting. I think also just on the sports thing, I think the one thing that these folks, the ones that do well, the Michael Jordans or whatever the one, is they find something they're really good at and that they love, and they invest their time, which is, as we discussed, one of the most valuable, if not the most valuable resource in it. And I think you see that they really enjoy it, and they love getting to training early and leaving late. I think they're a good example of people that have found their thing. Like
that's
really
what companies can do better. Do better in really nurturing where people are great at, and I think empowering frontline managers to make local decisions for the people that report into them, so that you're really creating a culture of trust, a culture of understanding, and I think, empowerment. So one of the things that I think companies, really want to do better, and I think it's really hard to implement, is how do you cross-train? How do you get people excited about new work? How do you make sure that you're, one of the things we always think about in leadership is everything has to go up. I'd really love to see us doing, really advocating for lateral moves, really advocating for, cross-functional development, really advocating for those side-to-side moves that allow you ultimately to be a better leader, because you've walked in the shoes of different people, you've walked in the shoes of different functions. We've moved away from that because we want specialization, we want unicorns, we want people to have impact quickly, and we've kind of lost patience in the arc of someone's career. And I think that's why we're also seeing, a lot of people kind of not, and companies too, we talk about that employer-employee contract, not investing as much in the long term. And I think we could do better there. And I think the companies that do that, and I see them, that are figuring out distributed work, that are empowering their leaders to make local decisions, as long as you're making decisions consistently, I think that you're in a good place from an HR perspective. But it's something's there's a sea change happening, whether it's nothing gets, I believe nothing really gets into kind of the legislation cycle unless there's some sort of response to something. Again, yeah. I think I'm with you, Lewis, and I think, Ed, you haven't committed to the 32-hour work week. I'm not sure that is the way to go, other than the framework for there's something bigger here that needs to shift and change. And again, from a DEI perspective, there's nothing that is going to send inclusivity into the stratosphere faster and more productively than a flexible work arrangement.
Yeah, all over that. I mean, let's be honest. I think in our firm, you can work whenever, pretty much, right? Like, we're all in different places, different countries, it's 9 a.m. somewhere in our team. Most of the time, San Fran to Mumbai. And so for us, it's, there's no like clocking in and clocking out. There's no like, where's Jamie? Why hasn't she turned up to the office? Why is she 10 minutes late? It's, we're kind of living the output game, where you put whatever, let's say, I'm just going to say you put the time in, but like you put the right kind of time in and you'll get the kind of output that you want. And then I think in an environment like that as an individual what you're putting into it. And if what you're getting is correct, kind of thing. So anyway, want to float that with you. The other thing is, read a great article in Economist today, which kind of like, I don't know if you can see that. So for those that can't, the secret to career success may be off to the side, and they're advocating for what they call a crab-like career. So lateral moves rather than climbing up the greasy pole. But you know, like a lot of you know, like when you enter the workforce, it's all like climbing up the ladder, right? Like climbing up that corporate ladder and getting that next thing again. And it could be quite a stressful thing, isn't it? You know, like always wanting to be promoted, and like you're the best, I don't know, engineer in your team, but you got thrust into the management role, and you're like, oh, I don't really like managing people. Like, quite like doing my engineering thing. So, you know, like I think more of these things are coming out now. You know, like it was always that the best person in whatever would be the leader, right? Like the best salesperson, the best engineer, the best whatever. Typically, the only path would be up to management. But I think there's more and more now you're seeing people that are opting for like individual contributor roles, or, you know, or just doing a really good job at whatever they like to do. I think I'm seeing more and more of that now. What do you think, Ed? Are you seeing that as well? Or?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard one, right? I mean, I'd love to read that article. Please send it over to me.
I'll put in the comments too for everyone else.
Yeah, definitely. I'd like to take a good read on it. You know, it's interesting because, you know, for me, being in the industry, this is my 24th year now. I'm aging myself, right? It's my 24th year in recruitment, executive recruitment, TA, however you want to paraphrase it, advisory. But as we talk about a 32-hour work week, it's super interesting. I you know, the American worker from the 1930s to now is working over 400% more productive, right, than it was when the law was first initiated. The 40-hour work week was initiated, right, when you go way back. I think that when I think about my work and I think about that 32-hour work week, if I have a client that needs a deliverable, I'm there. And, you know, maybe it's a generational thing, but I'm there, right? I'm there till the job is done. Whether if it takes me 32 hours in the week to get the work done, or it takes me 42 hours or 52 hours, right? My commitment to my client breaks this model all the time, right? So like I said, this is why I'm in the gray, and I haven't made a decision one way or the other, because what we do is so client driven, and I feel when a client invests in me, I'm so accountable. I want to be so accountable, so responsible, you know, for them, that I want to deliver, that they know that Ed's working on their opportunity behind the scenes, right? They don't have to call me. They know I'm working on it. So when I start thinking about this, it's great to have it there. I just don't know if I'm going to be pulling up and saying, yeah, I got my 32 hours and catch you later.
You're not going to put you out of office, are you, on saying, sorry, my 32 hours is up?
No, I don't
see you
think
next
so.
week.
I don't think so. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there. My client's going to reach out to me, and I'm going to be there. Whether if it's 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, I mean, that's my commitment. And that's why we do, you know, the work that we do in executive search. And that's, you know, we're advisors, and that's what they pay us for, right? They pay us to be there for them, to be that secret weapon sort of that in their back pocket that they need. So again, 32 hours sounds fantastic, but in reality, for those workers, and then there's different categories: exempt, non-exempt, right? For those that are not on hourly wages, it'll be very hard, in my mind at least, to pull away, right, and to not want to deliver.
Do we think that people would be happy to take a pay cut to do 4 days versus 5? Jamie, what do you reckon?
Okay, go ahead, Jamie. I'm sorry.
No for Med. Go on, Jamie.
Oh gosh.
It's a hard one.
Oh, no, I don't think people for the same job that they're doing, and if
Same job, but they
but
could say,
no,
look, you know what, you can do 4 days instead of five, but obviously we're going to give you 4/5 your salary.
no, I don't like taking a pay cut for the same amount of work. I think that, again, we're talking about, there's a few things I wanted
So
to
do
point
you
out.
think it's the same amount of work then? Like, are we looking
I'm
at,
starting, I think so. I think people adjust, right? When I was, when I was a younger working mother, when I first became a mom, I did the same amount of work in less time. I don't know how. Or I got the same results, right? So I think we're talking about work versus results. And I think that's the
yeah,
crux of this conversation. And let me just be very clear. I think leaders get it. I don't think that when we talk about corporations, I mean, corporations are an entity on paper. They're made up of people that get it. They are, we are working with two things happening at the same time. One is the belief that, I think there is a support system out there for people to have, more flexible work arrangements if the results don't, shift and change. And I think that's the question that's out there. I think the other thing is that we have institutions that aren't necessarily built for this. The 40-hour work week, especially when we're talking about, it's compensation related, right? It's really just a baseline for compensation. In most companies right now that and I think we could agree on this, we're talking also, there's a lot of variable compensation that does reward for output and results versus in office time. And I think that a base salary is just that. And in a lot of industries, it's a starting point. And it's really not, the end game for people that really do put in, the effort and time. However, speaking again for the underrepresented populations, there's going to be, places and times where we just need to, take different steps side to side. Sometimes we're going to need to go down the ladder a bit. We're going to need to do that crab walk. That's been in, in the minds of corporate HR for years. How do you create a technical track? How do you account for really, great performers that want to stay as individual contributors because they are solving big problems? And I've also been thinking about this a lot, is like, our idea of leadership is that, how do I manage my team? And one of the things that I've seen, it's really unsung as a skill set. And it's absolutely something that we should be looking at rewarding and compensating for, is cross-functional leadership. The people that can have no team or no direct reports, that can get really big projects done, really big ideas across the finish line. And I think that there is an opportunity for us to really reward those leaders. They are leading in organizations without authority, really through influence. It's a deep skill set that isn't always nurtured and always rewarded. To your point about that crab walk, how do we lessen the emphasis on climbing and more the emphasis on, rewarding the work that people like to do? There's a lot of issues at play here, but I want to be very clear. I do think that people really do understand that the 40 versus 32-hour work week is a baseline for compensation, and that every person, is going to respond to the work that they have with professionalism. I mean, that is what we expect of people. And if they're not, that's a different conversation about performance.
because yeah, I mean, I guess like the people that do the bare minimum, and then there's people that go above and beyond, right? Levels to all the different games, isn't there? Ed, where do you reckon we'll be? Do you reckon this is going to pass? Is this just an election thing before your elections in November? Like, where will where will we end up? Do you reckon on this one?
Golly, so to your point about not liking the phrase work-life balance, I think this is more about quality of life play, right? This is about quality of life. If this idea around allowing hardworking Americans to spend more time with their families, protecting, and also while protecting their wages and making sure that that profits, and as long as there's enough data out there, profits and productivity are still up. And I think what we'll net out is, if the data continues to show that productivity is unaffected, And matter of fact, it's actually gone up, and wages are stabilized, and revenues are up for companies, and it allows for people to increase their quality of life and spend more time with their families. It's going to be an interesting play, because the one thing that I can say where we are is in an environment of more data, right? Data is everywhere now, right? There are surveys happening. This research has been ongoing for quite a bit. And frankly, I'm not a huge fan of being under a law that's been around since the early 1900s. And I would love to see. I think there was I was a big Jetsons fan, right? I think you guys know I'm a big Jetsons fan. I think George in one episode was talking, oh, today was a full day. I did my whole 3 hours or 4 hours, something like that, right? So it's interesting, right? And I guess productivity, automation, robotics, it'll all have an impact. And we just have to figure out how to continue to evolve as a society. And yesterday's model is not today's model, and today's model won't be our future model. Continuing to evolve is who we are, and I think I prefer to embrace than say this is the way we've always done it. Let's innovate, and let's keep pushing the narrative.
That's well
I like
said.
that. Very well said, Ed. Very well said.
Well said, Ed.
Well said. I'm advocating for output over time. I think it's a good place to get to. So one thing I just want to say to the individual is don't hold back. So I think it's important to go all in on things. So sometimes you're going to have to put more work in and go above and beyond for your company. And so I think it's give and take, right? So that's all I would say. So wherever we end up, if you want to do well in life, you've got to put work in. You've got to put effort in. To build anything meaningful, you've got to spend time doing it. So yeah, I think wherever company you're at, whatever path you're choosing, you've got to invest time in something. So that's what I would say.
I would double down on that and say I think we also can do better in helping people understand where time is best well spent.
Yeah. Beautiful. Done. I think that's it. Thanks. Thank you everyone for joining. And I'm going to end.